Mark, you in there? Hey, if you don't answer me, I'm coming in. Eric, you home? I'm very impatient for good reason, knowing those things were still lurking about and slowly turning on. Locked. Shit. Not wanting to break any glass, I tried to kick the door in for fear of causing too much noise. Suddenly I remembered that they had a door leading directly down into the basement, access to the pool hall they built. The only way I knew this was the fact that the basement had looked at the house. It was still unlocked. Quite a few other houses in town. Before we found ours and finally made a decision. I crept down off the porch and carried over to the basement door and tried to open it. The door was still open at the inside. I'm not sure why, but at that moment, instead of going into the house, I left the door cracked open and decided to move. I went over to the garage door, and to my surprise, the door was unlocked as well. I walked in to find a pretty typical garage, various lawn equipment all stored in specific spots to make sure enough room was left to park one of the two vehicles inside. The section benches and cabinets didn't have anything that might be useful. I kind of expected to find a freezer full of extra food, similar to what my dad has.
Here.
Sadly, it also wasn't much useful to find while I was in there. I did, however, find an adult compound doll in a cabinet case. That's all well and good. It's useless on the second floor. Yes, I thought and exclaimed mid-thought as my eyes spotted a small bundle of about 10 arrows sitting in a case over in the corner of the garage. I walked over and pulled one out.
No.
I decided to grab them all anyway. Worst case, just sharpen the ends as they were. As I moved the case of arrows and slung it over my shoulder behind it, I saw a small metal box. Oh, yes. The box had large, razor blade broadheads for deer hunting in it. Now I had some form of projectile weapon to protect my family. I gathered my newfound treasures and I walked back out of my neighbor's garage, dropped the bag of arrows, heads, and the bow over the fence in our backyard. I crept back to the basement door and let out a soft whine as I opened it and walked down the steps.
Okay.
As I got to the bottom of the steps, I heard an odd clicking. It was dramatic. I thought it may be the house itself creaking. Still holding a makeshift spear in my backpack, I was planning on using it for whatever food I could find back to our house. Luckily, even though I couldn't find any freezer in the garage, I did find one in the basement. I walked over and pulled up the lid. It was about half full, but it was more than enough to get us past a few more weeks of needed as far as meat goes. I loaded a good amount of it into the backpack, and I left the rest to come back later if I needed it. Power was still working perfectly, and I saw no problem leaving the rest of the meat safely in the working freezer. I thought I should check the rest of the house for more non-perishables, possibly some evidence that my neighbors had been out of town during the beginning of all this. As I walked the steps up to the first floor, I noticed two really unsettling things. First being an all too familiar scent of rotten. Knowing deep down that no possible way that was true. The other thing was I noticed that some fog was inside the house. It hadn't been so obvious being in the basement. I got to the steps of the first floor. It became more obvious. I climbed the steps cautiously and quietly, slowly moved around the house until I found the pantry. I filled the rest of my bag with as many useful cans of food as I could. The bag getting heavy. Which made me believe I heard it.
There we go. That's perfect. Okay.
Setting my bag by the basement steps and moving to the front of the house, still with my knife on the stick. As I got to the living room, I realized something was very off. The big picture window in the living room had been smashed. Glass lay all over the hardwood floor, meaning there's something had broken in.
That's not how you do that.
This was the reason all the fog had been able to pour into the house. As I made my way past the glass and the steps to the upstairs, the smell becoming more and more nauseating. I crept up the steps, my blade moving away. Doorways on either side of the narrow hall met me as I reached the top of the steps. I moved slowly,
Oh, seriously?
as silent as I could, making my way down the hall. The first bedroom door empty. The child's bedroom. The room across the hall empty. Further down the hall, I moved. The bathroom.
No.
Suddenly, its pure white eyes split vertically in the middle and separated as they were eyelids from some reptile, revealing holes in its face. And before I had merely assumed that they were its eyes simply based on where they had been located on its head, from those holes came two praying mantis-like arms, rearing back towards its horns and plunging into the dead body lying beneath the creature. It made its clicking noises again as it fed on the protrusions from the front of its face. Must have been hollow because it looked like the creature was drinking their insides, using them like demonic flesh straws. I began to step away, and I saw the creature open its gills and its ribs and release more of that purple fog into the air. The creature ripped its flesh straws out of the corpse and turned its head to me. And the only thoughts screaming through my skull were, oh, shit. The creature let out its piercing screech, causing my ears to hurt, my palms to vibrate. It lunged at me, dark talons flying towards my face. I fell backwards, rising the makeshift spear up as I fell, and the creature's talons ripped into my shoulders while threatening back as its weird hand clasped across my arm. The blades of my spear stabbed into the creature's chest, but it didn't plunge very deep. Before the tape tore and I was just left holding a dowel rod. Pinned to the ground by the creature, it moved its head closer to mine and struck at me with those needles coming from its eyes. They made a thud and splinters flew up as I just had enough movement to dodge, and it made contact with the floor beneath my head. It clicked at me ominously as it reared up for another strike. The creature surprisingly wasn't very heavy, so I took this split second as it reached up to move my arm and throw it back away from me. As I threw it, it tried to strike again, hitting nothing but air as it flew back. The claws ripped away from my shoulder as it flew through the air. It landed back on its hands and feet and immediately jumped at me again. As it came at me, I lifted my legs, making contact with its chest. It came down on my foot, bending my legs almost as if adding pressure to a spring. Just before I went to kick it away, I reached up and grasped the handle of the knife, still half embedded in its chest. I kicked the beast away and off to the side, trying to aim it into a room, hoping to close the door behind it and run. As I kicked it away from me, my hand on the knife, it pulled free from the beast's chest. It almost made it through the door that I had tried for, but before it hit sideways and dropped to the floor, just on its side of the door frame. I had just enough time to scramble to my feet as it did the same and immediately lunged at my face again. I ducked just in time, slamming the knife into its ribs, just about where its gills were. This time, I buried the knife all the way in, and the creature shuddered and let out an excruciating screech, letting me know that I had heard it. I didn't leave the knife in this time. I backed away from it and I pulled the knife with me. After I truly heard it, it seemed to slow down its attack, becoming more methodic. With my other hand, I grabbed the dowel rod up off the floor, now having a knife and a club. I felt like I might be able to win this fight. My shoulders burned with pain from the talons that ripped through my flesh. I swung the club at it, and it backed up for a split second, lunging at me as I finished my swing. I stepped and pressed myself against the wall of the hallway and attempted to dodge, which worked for the most part, but I still caught a talon in my hip. I spun around and swung the knife blindly, luckily making contact and chopping off one of the face needles, and half of the other all in one swing. This clearly did some major damage to it, because without those, it seemed to lose any form of coordination. It began stumbling and tripping over its own feet. Its attacks became very sorry attempts. It made it very easy for me to lunge in and drive that knife directly into the slit in his head. as the knife drove into the creature, it almost instantly went limp. As it lay on the ground, finally lifeless, its gills opened again and released a large amount of purple fog into the air. As I saw this, I quickly made my way back downstairs. I grabbed my bag, I went down to the basement past the freezer, I went out the back door. I hurried, putting all caution about being quiet aside, tossed the bag over the fence as well as the dowel rod and knife, moved a few feet down the fence before I climbed over. I fell. I really didn't want to fall on the knife. I was already in enough pain to add to that. I grabbed the whole bag. My shoulder and hip were hurting, especially while I was awake. I carried it all back to the door where Grace was waiting for me and opened the door as I got close. As I came through the door, I dropped the bags and I embraced my wife in a hug, letting her know that shit has been crazy. But I knew that I love her very much. Grace moved all the bags and their mess dragged my pants on the bottom of the desk, stripped me down into the violent civil around me, constellations moved, sterilized my wound, grabbed the first aid kits around the house, small sewing kit, needles and thread, one of them automated medical stitches. She used her phone to bandage my wounds on YouTube, followed along with sewing special. She then wrapped bandages and gauze over my hurt. And then sleep. I woke up in pain all over night. She was lifted up off the floor, put in the mirror, and put images of herself. So as my girlfriend made my way upstairs to the bed, I was able to hold Grace softly until I patted her. Thank you, sir. And then I went to her. I fell back into the deep sleep. Day 21. Now, glad that we made it a few days without incident after my encounter with the creature. We haven't seen any since, but heard them outside. Otherwise, they tend to become more vocal. I thought many times to myself since my supply room in the neighbor's house what horrors I might have found in the last two rooms at home. I made it halfway down the hall before running into the fighting creature. These are questions that concern me. I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answers. Thanks to my expedition, we now had a bow, a set of arrows, as well as a healthier supply of food. This, however, was only a temporary solution in my mind. One reason was that I knew I was pretty much shit with a bow and was very little practice with one. I also knew that I really couldn't stay here. I knew Grace would. I had to find a way to get her out of this town or more secure. My truck isn't strong enough to push Humvees out of the way. There isn't enough room to go around. I sat on the couch with Addie. She played on her tablet. The girls have been so well behaved during this whole ordeal so far. And I'm thankful that even though they don't really know what's going on, they're listening well and being quiet and eager to keep safe. The dogs, on the other hand, they've acted almost completely oblivious to what's going on, except for a few moments or cleaning and being quiet. Thankfully, they haven't caused any huge problems. They quiet down rather quickly. Just as I was thinking, I hear Grace whisper from the upstairs room, "Shut it! Front door, bring me Addie." I shut up, grabbed Addie, carried her to Grace as she moved the girls upstairs. As I handed her Addie, I turned to the door. I saw what she was signaling me. One of the creatures had made its way over the porch and was pushing me.
God.
I moved to the kitchen and I grabbed the bow off the top of the fridge while the arrows, having the tips screwed on previously in preparation. I moved up to the front door and unlocked it and opened it while the creature was at the far end of the porch. I backed up about 10 feet and took a knee, knocking an arrow and drawing back, aimed at the front door. One of the things I learned on my supply run was the creature creatures seemed to be blind. They did their hunting through sound mostly, possibly smell. As long as I was quiet, I could at least get one solid shot off before I knew I was there. I sat in silence, waiting. The creature slowly walked to the doorway and past the threshold. I clicked my tongue and Reese froze and focused his head directly at the sound and directly at me. At that split second, I released it and let fly the arrow. I aimed for its nose slits but missed the mark, but did make contact. It hit the creature in the shoulder and buried itself halfway in. The creature let out a shriek as I knocked another arrow and drew back. Drawing the bow each time felt like fresh knives being stabbed into my wounded shoulder. Firing a second time and hitting my mark this time, dropping the beast where it stood. As it hit the ground, it released plumes of purplish gray fog into the air, upsetting me into our house. I got off my knee and fully sat down, relaxing. Then my heart settled back down in suspense. As I stared at the now dead creature blocking my open front door, I heard movement on the steps. Very shortly after, the door to the steps slowly creaked open. Through the slit, I met eyes with my wife. And since she saw I was sitting calmly, she opened the door the rest of the way and stepped into the room. She answered my question before I even asked it. You're seeing that it was all blood. This being the first time Grace had an up-close look at one of the creatures, she walked up to it to inspect it. Is this just like the other fog record? Yeah. She knelt down and looked at his unusual photo. Yeah. Yeah, I was much more ready for this thing. As I began to stand up. Move that body up. Holy shit! Grace interrupted me as she grabbed one of the arrows protruding from the fog lurker and ripped it out as she runs back towards me. She covered half the distance between us before I saw one of the raccoon-sized flaming spider creatures run through the doorway towards us. I knelt to grab another arrow lying by my side on the ground as it jumped at me. Grace swung the arrow in her hand and connected with it, not doing much damage, but hitting it hard enough to change its course mid-air so it wouldn't hit me. Grace took 2 steps back and grabbed the shaft of the arrow with both hands. It was essentially a sharp stick, and she knew that, but it was better than being completely unarmed. I knocked the new arrow and turned to the beast, drawing the bow and sending gripping pain through my shoulder at the same time. Just as I turned, Grace met eyes with the spider and grabbed her head as the torrent of horrific images flashed through her mind. In the panic, I fired, missing the center mass of the beast, but pinning 2 of its legs to the floor and mobilizing it. It let out a guttural scream of pain and switched its gaze to me. I tried to look away, but I was too slow, and our eyes met, sending pictures of torture and gore through my mind, like a mental tsunami crashing into an oceanfront city. As I became stunned, Grace was released from the creature's mental assault. She recovered quickly and lunged for the creature, burying the arrow still in her hands into its back. The creature broke eye contact with me as it let out another scream of anguish. Grace scrambled to her feet and backed away from the creature. We both realized that what we thought were flames were nothing more than orange, bioluminescent hairs. They were nothing more than an illusion, a very convincing one. Nevertheless, still an illusion. I ran to the lurker in the doorway and ripped at the last arrow in its face, knocked it, painfully drew the bow back, took aim, and fired. The screams of the spider creature suddenly stopped as the arrow pierced its neck, just below its skull, ripping through its throat and killing it. As it lied dead, Grace and I breathing heavy in the eyes. Maybe I'm not as shit with a bow as I thought, I said, dropping the bow to the ground and walking over to Grace, who was clearly still tense from the battle. She wrapped her arm around me, let her breathing whisper. We need to get these bodies outside and get the door closed, so we don't let any more of that fog in, she said. And she let go of me and began pulling arrows out of the flame spider. So far, we haven't noticed any actual fogging fog other than God nature. It seemed to be dangerous in the air. That being said, I fully agreed with her. Didn't really feel like taking any chances with it. We got the lurker outside of the porch, and my wife grabbed the spider by its legs and threw it out the door and into the front yard. It hit the ground with a thud a few feet from the lurker. We closed and locked the door. I grabbed the fan from the basement, aimed it out the windows, to purge the house of the fog as best I could. Grace opened the door to the steps leading upstairs. My both dogs waiting on the other side. We prompted piles of lying on the carpet. Both my wife and I were upstairs to check the rooms. Izzy had fallen asleep on a pile of stuffed animals.
Damn.
Daddy had covered her with one of her blankets. He was yelling to curl up next to her sister and pass out as well. Dog liquor. I said Grace to close the door behind her and go to sleep. That's what you called it downstairs. You have a name for the before. I like it. There's one. She smiled, but it quickly faded as we hear the dogs let out one bark each and come running upstairs past us and into the bedroom. Grace and I looked at each other and then run downstairs. We saw the problem. Having our front door open as we fought the two creatures, that their screams of pain alert others. None of the lurkers were present, but we saw at least 3 of the flame spider things walking in circles around the outside of our house. Grace and I looked at each other. Without a word, we set out in different directions, making sure all the blinds were closed and all the windows. After about an hour of periodic checking, the creatures left. And after we confirmed that there was none of them left around the house, my nerves settled and I realized that I was really hungry. So I began to cook something for us all in the kitchen. Grace checked on the girls and then joined me in the kitchen to get some food ready. We all ate. And we decided we had more than enough excitement one day and gathered everyone upstairs for the night. Grace whispered to me as we sat, watching the girls play quietly, wind down to the bed. And then, there was a lot of activity, a lot of noise. And I wondered if my plan was impossible, if I had all the parts available. Mommy, play Barbies with me, please, Daddy said, as she reached over to Grace, Barbie in hand. Grace crawled over and played with her for a little while as I went to the bathroom to remove any bandages and see how much damage I had done to my stitches. We all gathered in our bedroom again, as always, that night, instead of lying awake. We had so many nights before. I slept hard. And dreamed slumber until we awoke next morning. Day 22. After we got Addie and Izzy settled for breakfast, Grace asked me about what the details of my plan were. I realized our conversation had gotten cut short last night due to Addie's request to play with Barbies. Knowing that we needed something to move the Humvees out of the way, we have no way out of town. Also knowing that my truck would be unable to move them, I remembered that just 2 blocks away was a farm equipment repair building that usually had some form of large and powerful farm equipment parked in front. Now, this was much longer of a journey than hopping the fence to get food from the neighbors. Also, I had no guarantee that there would even be any big tractors or equipment. It's an empty parking lot. If I made that journey just to be met with emptiness in the parking lot, not to mention, if I'd be able to get that thing started, if there was something there. There were so many unknown variables.
Earth.
But I don't want to draw that much attention myself before we get together. This time, for this plan to work, I'm going to have to get over there. Start whatever I can. Find move the Humvees out of the way, all while you gather all the supplies you can and get the dogs and girls loaded into the van. Even if the roadblock gets out of there. It's a lot of steps. A lot to go wrong. He said. Yeah, I know. Can you think of any better idea? I don't know. Anything taking if I could come up with a better idea? There are some other options. Sadly, I think the sooner the better, since we've clearly attracted attention to our house. We've heard the parade of pictures we had around the house last night. Let's gather stuff up in the house tonight. Try to get it to the van in the morning. It seems like I see them walking around at least around midday. So that's you know, I'm green. The rest of the day went rather quickly. We packed together supplies, living in the van for a week, loading food in boxes and cooler, clothes and diapers, dog food, precious time. The nerves rattled in anticipation of how the plan would play out for me. Day 23. We spent the morning letting the girls play in the toilet rooms, Grace and I carefully, quietly lowered the big prepackaged supplies. Working in silence, we both felt the tension from the impending trial she was experiencing. The dogs watched inquisitively as we moved bags and boxes from the house to the van. I could tell that they began to get excited at the sight, thinking they'd soon be going for a car ride. And every time we came back to the house, Bodie began to wag his tail and alternate his glances from me to the leashes hanging on the door. Soon, Bodie, just relax, please, I said to him, as I patted him on the head, coming in for the last time. He trotted off and found a spot to lie down near the girls playing. May, on the other hand, continued to follow me around the house for the next 20 minutes, insisting that it was time to go for a ride. We ate lunch, and as we finished, Grace and I met eyes and suddenly agreed. It was time. She gave me a hug and a kiss. We told each other that we loved the other. I grabbed the bow, expecting to make sure it hadn't broken in any way, put all the arrows I could find into the bow-mounted quiver, and walked to the door. Okay, get the girls and the dogs ready. Stay in the house until you hear a big machine start up. Get them in the van and meet me on the east side of town. I'm the closest to the intersection. I said as I turned the handle to walk out the door. Grace said as I walked out the door. I will. Make sure it's ready to go. This is basically our one shot that we have of this. I said, looking into her eyes. Let her know how serious the situation was. Closed the door behind me. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves as I crouched at the top of the steps of our front porch, a purple shimmer of fog swirled around me. Quietly, I went down the steps and over to the huge oak tree in the corner of the yard, just to the side of the intersection. Crouched by the tree, I scanned my surroundings. It was the first time that I had been able to see any further into the trees since the fog rolled into town. Screeching came from the distance, but from the opposite direction than where I was traveling. Diagonal across the intersection from my position sits a house with a 4-foot privacy fence in the back. Through their backyard was the shortest distance to my intended destination. The door to the house was destroyed and looked like it had been ripped in its hinges. The front window had been smashed in. Nothing but silence came from the house. I ran directly from the backyard, aiming to jump over the far side of the fence's cover. Just as I reached the edge of the yard, I could see from the corner of my eye the orange glow of one of the spider creatures brightening as it traveled down the street in my direction. I hopped the fence and lay flat on the other side, peering through the slats, hoping that I hadn't been noticed. Close behind the spider was another. And then another. Another, until there was a group of 5 of them crawling down the street. As I hit the ground on the other side of the fence, the creatures skittered into the intersection and continued down past the road. When they got directly in front of me, I looked around and noticed that all of my focus on being quiet and watching the spiders travel toward me caused me to ignore the fact that the neighbor's big black dog had been lying next to me. Violently destroyed. It had been clearly killed and been sucked dry by one of the lurkers, left in a hollow pile of furry flesh throughout the yard. He grimaced at the sight of the heedless dog to wash out. I waited almost a full minute after the creatures had skittered off before I moved. As I got to my feet, more so crouched position, I decided after seeing the creature move in an almost patrol around the town, I should be more prepared. As this thought blazed through my mind, I snagged an arrow and mounted it, readying it to be drawn and fired if I ran into trouble. I moved to the far corner of the backyard and, quietly as I could, hopped the far side of the fence. I had 2 open backyards and a fence left to go, and I would be at my destination. Very little cover between where I was and where I was going. Nevertheless, I had to get there. In the first backyard, there were 2 trees, both of which were way too young and small to be able to effectively trying to hide behind a broomstick. As I sat in the corner of the fence looking out in the direction I needed to go, trying to calculate the path that would give me the most cover, I noticed there was a lurker moving slowly along the fence. Though I'd be able to take a shot at this distance with any form of accuracy, so I waited as it continued off away from me. Just as I took my first step across the next yard, a single spider came skittering perpendicular to my path and stopped directly in front of me. Nearly 15 yards from my face, the same direction the lurker had gone, and now that I think of it, other spider creatures were traveling in the same direction as well. Are they being drawn to something over there? I thought to myself as I drew back the bow, taking aim at the spider. I wanted to be ready to let loose an arrow instantly if it began to turn in my direction. It sat perfectly motionless in front of me. Impatient, I held my breath. I tuned my aim. And released. A perfect shot right in the center of mass of the creature. I quickly grabbed and knocked another arrow, not knowing if I had killed it. Without a scream or screech, the spider slowly wobbled and then fell limp on the ground. Staying low and fast, I moved across the first yard, stopping only to retrieve my arrow from the spider and moving quickly to the second yard, toward the fence. Halfway through the second yard, I heard from behind me a guttural scream, followed by another and another. It was another group of spiders. I had no idea if they were coming in my direction or simply calling out, but I didn't stop. I kept moving to the fence, 4 foot high, and made an odd type of chain link that I did my best to hop over as quietly as I could. On the other side of the fence were a few fir trees, blocking my view to the farm equipment. I was almost there. I pressed through the branches of 2 of the trees, but stopped. Looked back halfway through, using the branches as cover. The group of spiders I heard a second ago were surrounding the one I had shot, inspecting it to some degree. I stepped backwards and turned around, burying myself deeper in the branches and covering myself further from view. I came out the other side of the trees. I was met with the most beautiful sight I'd seen in weeks. Before me sat a massive red tractor. It had tread like a bulldozer. It was one of those tractors that kind of hinges in the middle. I've never driven one of those before, but now was no time to be picky. I quickly climbed up the steps to the cab and opened the refreshingly unlocked door. It would have been nice to see the keys sitting in the ignition, but of course, it would be way too convenient. I ran back down the steps and made my way over to the building. It was a big white building with one massive garage door and one window in the main door. I moved to the main door, checking the handle. Under my breath. No choice. I had to break the glass. I searched the ground to find a chunk of broken cement about the size of a grapefruit. I picked it up, and just before I threw it through the glass, a thought shot through my mind. This is going to be loud. Crash! The glass shattered as the cement disappeared into the darkness of the building behind the door. Seconds later, I heard a screech in the distance coming from a lurker. Shh! Hurry, hurry, hurry. I think to myself as I reached in and unlocked the door. I opened it, click on the light. This is a terrible idea. I have no idea where they would keep the keys in here. I think as I scrambled around the building, looking through the drawers and cabinets, I heard another screech from the lurker, only this time it came from just outside the front door of the building. I looked toward the door. It opened and whispered to myself. I kneel and draw the bow, aiming at the front door. Just as the lurker appears in the doorway, I notice a small white cabinet behind the door linked with keys. I think as I trained my focus back to my aim and waited for the lurker to snap further into view. A few more of its demonic steps carried the beast into the doorway and closer to me. Each step seemed the digits spread apart, and its steps pulled back together as it lifts its foot for the next step. It gets within 15 feet of me before I click my tongue to cause it to direct its head directly at me, giving me the best possible angle for its nose slits. And after it jerks its head to me, it freezes for just a second. And it's in that second that I release. Snap! And the arrow strikes the steel wall behind the creature. The sound of the arrow hitting causes the lurker to spin around and lunge, hitting the wall directly where the arrow hits. The accuracy of this animal with no eyes, it amazes me. I quickly knock and draw another arrow, take aim, and just as it turns back to me, it leaps at me, and in a panic, I release. The arrow strikes the base of the creature's neck midair, and it rolls to the side as it lands with a thud on the floor where I was. Sputtering, trying to make noise, It slowly rose its head. It poured a bright purple fluid from the spot the arrow was sticking out of its neck. It stumbled around, clearly in extreme pain. It's still trying its best to be effective in a fight. I knocked and drew a third arrow. It stumbled toward me, trying for one last sorry attempt at an attack. It got within 10 feet of me, and I put the final arrow right through its nose, dropping the creature instantly. I rushed over to the body and pulled the two out and placed them back in the quiver. First it hit the wall, damaged the arrow, rendering it useless, and left it. I ran to the box on the wall and ripped it open. Thankfully, there was only one machine in the lot, which meant there was only one set of keys in the box. I grabbed them in a rush and then paused. I slowed myself down. I slowly peered out of the doorway, checking for any other keys still in my way. The coast looked clear, so I moved to the tractor, and I ran up the ladder, settling myself in the cab. Once I left the house, Grace promptly began getting the girls ready. Izzy was placed in a car seat, and Addie was dressed and shoes on, ready to go. The dogs had also been harnessed and leashed and ready to go as Grace stood by the front door, waiting for the signal. She began to worry as time grew longer and longer. Izzy sat in the car seat, playing with her feet, and Addie played quietly with her Barbies by the back door. May lied quietly at the back door, waiting to be let out, as Bodie paced back and forth, Grace at the front door to May at the back door, with his leash dragging on the ground, following him as he walked. Just as Grace began to truly worry that something had been wrong, the sound of a big engine roaring to life came from the distance. Grace then grabbed the dog leashes, left the girls in the house, hit the button on the key fob to open the back hatch of the van, and rushed the dog out to the van, putting them in the back and closing the latch. She ran back inside the house, grabbed the car seat in Addie's hand, and led them outside the van. As she got to the garage door, she hit the buttons on the key fob to open the side doors, and they did. She sent Addie to climb up into her seat, and she went to the other side to click Izzy's car seat into its base and close the door. When Grace made her way around to buckle Addie in, May barked as she saw one of the spider creatures emerge from a fog down the street. May crawled under Addie's legs and jumped out the door before Grace could get around to block her. May ran, barking at the creature. Grace yelled for her to come back. She couldn't chase her. She still needed to buckle Addie in. May ignored Grace's calls and ran at the creature, leaping and biting it. The creature spun as it let out screams and met eyes with May. May cowered back, unable to break eye contact with the spider. The spider leapt at May, landing on her back and then sinking its mandibles into her back and disrupting her view from the creature's eyes. May, regaining the ability to move, yelped in pain as blood began to run down her back from the bite. She shook the creature off and turned in for her own attack. As she turned, she began locking eyes with the spider. She froze from place a second time. Grace watched in horror. With tears in her eyes, the spider held May in place, its mind-assaulting gaze. The lurker came running from May's side and tackled her. May yelped, cried in pain, but her cries were cut short as the lurker plunged its sharp fangs into the side, killing her. The spider got closer and began to eat her as well. Grace cried as she started the car. May's crying. Addie saw his face floored out of the driveway toward the beasts. Grace began to yell in anguish as she picked up speed and hit both creatures. The van rumbled and bounced as she ran over the two beasts, killing and mangling both bodies. Through the tears in her eyes, she saw in the rearview mirror the bloody lifeless body of our beloved family pet, two piles of broken bones, flesh, and purple blood that made up what's left of the bodies of the two creatures that had murdered me. I got settled into the cab, inserted the keys, and twisted it, bringing the massive tractor to life. I pressed the throttle lever all the way up and shifted into lowest gear to give myself the most torque. I pressed the gas and drove out of the lot and down the road towards the gas station, the roadblock that I was supposed to meet Grace at. I hope everything is going to be okay out here, and I thought to myself as I drove down the road. The enormous amount of noise from the giant tractor attracted animals to my location, and as they ran out into the street in front of me, drawn to the sound, a smile grew on my face. The creatures that had tormented us for over 3 weeks now caused a bump as they disappeared beneath the treads of the tractor. When I reached the roadblock, I didn't even slow down, and the tractor made contact with the Humvees and pushed them out of the way with ease. Once they were out of the way, I pulled the tractor off to the side of the road and waited. My wait wasn't very long. When I saw the van's headlights pierce the fog and Grace skidded to a halt alongside the tractor. I switched the tractor off, grabbed the bow, got out of the cab, and I rushed down the ladder quickly to get to the passenger side of the van. As soon as I got the door closed, Grace took off down the road. "Daddy, May was crying," Abby called from the back seat. "No, she's not, sweetheart. She's. Where's May?" I responded to Grace. Grace broke into tears, caught at the side of the road and stopped. "She ran off to attack one of those spy lines while I was loading the girls," she said between sobs. Then proceeded to tell me what had happened. She completed her story of the events that had transpired during her escape. I looked back into the van with tears in my eyes, and my family was now missing one of its members. Rage bubbled up inside me, pure hatred for the situation, and even more so the creatures that had taken my dog from me. Grace told me that she was still a bit rattled and asked me to drive and switch places. After a few deep breaths to calm myself from anger and shifted the drive, pressed the pedal, and turned down the road onto a four-lane interstate. The plan was to go to the nearest city and see how far this insanity reached. We sat driving for 10 minutes on a barren interstate,